here I am standing beside one of our active Chinampa gardens. Actually it's right behind me here. This is where today I am going to set up our demo garden, our demo Three Sisters garden for MiniTFO, which is a French language public television station for children, an educational station. They contacted me and asked if they could come and do an episode on the Three Sisters here at our farm. I don't want a camera crew in our main garden because it's going to be at the end of August when they come, when I can barely walk through my garden. I don't want a camera crew in there. So I'm setting up a separate garden, and I'm going to do a single very large Three Sisters garden here. It's a floating garden, it's a Chinampa garden, and here I am right now. I'm standing on the side where most of the water passes, because the water starts from over there, it comes from that way, and it flows through here. I've directed it through here, and I set this garden up right beside where the water goes, and then it directs and it goes that way, and eventually it joins the water that comes from out back from that other place that I talked to you about in the other Chinampa and so on. So here I am standing in the water, 30 centimeters of water, a foot of water. I'm in my rubber boots. You can hear it. Remember when I first discovered this, I thought, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do about this? Because of course you can't plant directly in water. All this water I'm standing in is also directly under this garden. At the foot of this garden there are logs. There's one here. I don't know if you can see it. There's one here, but throughout this garden at the bottom, it's full of logs of dead trees, on top of which there are branches and dead leaves and compost. A couple of years worth as we've built it up. And last fall I put a nice thick layer of leaves, which I'm just leaving there. And in the center, I rake the leaves to the side that you're going to see in a minute, and I put that pile of mushroom compost. And that's what I'm going to plant directly in. This is one of our active Chinampa gardens, and it really works. Last year we had grains in here. The year before we had squash. And this year we're going to have the Three Sisters, and it's going to be surrounded by syrup sorghum, sugarcane sorghum. So here you can see the water beneath me, and the Chinampa garden behind me. You can see it continuing. Planks set up so I'm not walking on the earth and compacting it. I've got my posts here. Got some jute twine that I'm reusing from the sorghum that I had hanging in the workshop over the winter time in the garage. I'm gonna reuse it now to tie these up, because the jute from last year and from the year before is getting a little weak, and I don't want it to break because it'll probably break. And these branches now I've been using probably for at least 3 years. And these are, you can probably guess it because I've talked about them a lot. This is buckthorn that I took out of the forest 3 or 4 years ago. I stood them up in teepees with dozens and dozens and dozens of these poles, branches, to have them dry for a year before using them in the garden. And so now I'm just gonna, I've got 4 posts. I've got 4 posts here, which are probably about 7 feet tall. So that's what, just over 2 meters tall. All right, that's good because the beans grow high up. But the thing about beans, when they've reached their highest point and they start to kind of fall down, and the vine starts to grow downwards because it has no more upwards to go, what you can do with your bean vine, once it's reached its highest point, you just clip the end. You know, you can just clip it with your fingers or with a pair of scissors. You clip the end, and then that vine will sprout out all sorts of branches, side branches all along the vine, and you'll get that many more beans. And you know how I learned that? Guess who taught me that? Well, no person taught me that. Deer taught me that. Because deer came along one year. I've spoken about this in another video. They came and they ate a whole bunch of our beans. Actually, no, they ate the leaves off our bean vines and the ends and so on. And everywhere where they had basically pruned it by eating it, the beans grew more branches. And we ended up having more beans from the areas the deer had browsed on than the areas they hadn't. This was an area where we had planted beans outside our main garden, because we've got stuff in place to avoid the deers going in our main garden with all the rose bushes and the raspberry bushes and so on, which I've shown in different videos, but I can always show again. So this is all, I'm just gonna stand this up for a minute. So this has got 4 posts. Now once it's standing, they're all leaning on each other, so it's not quite 7 feet tall anymore, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be hugely tall. The corn plants are about 6 feet tall. They can actually be 7 feet tall too, but so long as the TeePee is strong enough, the corn plants can grow up to 8 or even 9 feet tall, and sometimes even taller, and the beans too. So long as the TeePee is strong enough, then they'll do that. And actually, when I set the TeePee up, like right now it's just sitting on top of the ground, but when I set it up, I'm gonna push each of these posts into the soil, and so they'll be a lot firmer. They're not the most straight pieces of wood. I do use recycled wood, but I'm not using it for this demonstration garden. I'm not using this recycled wood for the demonstration garden, because I want to model for the children. I want to model the idea of the fact that you can even find a good use for an invasive species if you have to get rid of it. So if you have to cut something, if you have to cut a living tree for some reason, you know, like it's an invasive species, you can still find a good use for it. And so that's why I'm using these in this garden. They're not the prettiest thing in the world. Out front, where you can see it, you know, from the road and so on, most of our teepees are made from recycled wood. A lot longer pieces than this, you know, 6-7 foot pieces to about 2 meter pieces, or so, a bit more. Most of our teepees are made with that, although I started with just these, and so we still have some teepees out front with these too. So now what I'm going to do, so this Chinampa is basically, it's covered with a thick layer of leaves all around, and under there's compost, there's branches, there are logs, but the logs I put in place 3 years ago, so they're quite deep now and probably half decomposed, so a bit like hugelkultur too. And there's lots of compost from the previous years, from just all the vegetation being added. And last fall I put a thick layer of leaves, and rather than remove them, because everything under them is decomposing anyways, I've just put this big mound here in the middle, so there's going to be one big Three Sisters patch. And so I'm just going to flatten this mound a little. This is pure mushroom compost that's been, you know, decomposing for months. And now, so we might get mushrooms in here as well, although it's not very dark here, so probably not. Probably won't get mushrooms in here. Mushrooms need it dark. So now I've spread that out, and this pile is probably about 4 feet wide, 1.20 meters wide, which is perfect. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be planting the corn in the middle. I'll probably plant maybe 10, well, probably 20 seeds, but I'm probably going to keep about 10 corn plants in the middle, 10 corn stalks, and then I'm going to plant all on the outside. I'm going to plant the squash all around the outside of the circle, and so the squash is going to grow out towards all the edges of this garden, and it's going to have all this space, and it's going to fill this space. And as the squash grows, let's see if I can kneel down here. Yeah, you can still see me. Actually, I'm going to kneel down on the other side. As the squash grows, as the vines reach all these areas with all these leaves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the vines, not so much the leaves, but the vines themselves. I'm going to cover them in leaves so the vine can come into contact with the soil beneath. And everywhere where there's a leaf node coming off the vine, the squash vine is going to be able to sprout some roots. And that is the protection against the squash vine borer bug. Because the squash vine borer bug, what it does is it lays the moth or whatever it is lays its eggs at the base of the plant or anywhere where the plant is freshly growing, and then those eggs hatch, and that little caterpillar inside the vine is going to start eating the vine. However, the vine grows quickly, and so every time I see the vine having some growth, I cover it up. And so I cover it up, I cover those vines up. So first, the moth is going to have a rougher time finding the vines because they're going to be covered up. But number two, because the first eggs will have been at the base of the vine, the new vine growth that I'm covering up with leaves is going to sprout new roots, and is going to allow the plant to survive if the base of the plant gets eaten by the bugs. The plant will still continue to be able to grow a ton of leaves here. I'll be able to cover all those vines. This whole area should be covered in squash, and those prickly vines are gonna, what they're gonna do is they're gonna keep all the little animals away from the corn and away from the beans, because they don't like those vines. And also, with all these leaves in place, the moisture below, when we stop getting so much rain in, let's say, July, when it starts to get dry, well, there's still going to be a lot of moisture below. There's still going to be a lot of this water below, and the roots are going to be able to reach down in there and find all that water because this is a Chinampa. So this is one of the ways you garden on a wet spot. And so I've said it in a few other videos. I've made a playlist. I'm going to add this to the playlist. I'm going to be talking about other things today. But this is an important one because so many people are nervous about wet spots, but there's so much you can do with them. Now, I have flattened most of this pile here. By the way, I've set up some boards here that I'm standing on, so I don't have to be actually standing on the earth, because that would compact it down. I'm standing on boards which evenly distribute my weight over a wider section of the garden, and so I'm not compacting the garden as much. Now I'm going to set this up. I'm going to basically just push each one of these poles as far into the ground as I can without making it too short, obviously. I don't want it to be just a meter tall or 4 feet tall or whatever. And I'm going to try and I've got 4 poles, so I'm going to try and get the 4 ends of this, the 4 sides of it, well, all the sides of this circle. Now this side needs a little adjustment. There we go. I think it's straight enough, and it's still pretty tall. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be covered in bean vines anyway, so once the beans and the corn are grown, you're not even going to see this TeePee anymore. It's all attached with the jute. And so at the base of each of these posts in the earth, I'm going to plant 5 or 6 beans at each base, and they're going to grow up. And also at the base of the corn plants, I'm going to plant maybe 1 bean at the base of each one, because I don't want to strangle those corn plants as they're starting to grow. And so the beans are going to grow up these posts, and the vines are also going to reach into the corn. Well, they're going to reach in and out to all the corn stalks that are here. They're going to attach themselves to those corn stalks too, and attach themselves to this, which means those corn stalks are going to be well held in place. So the corn, it's good that the corn be somewhat grown before you plant the other stuff, because it has to be tall. So I'm going to be planting the corn on Wednesday. Tuesday night, May 7th, around 11 p.m. or so, it's going to be the new moon. The day after the new moon, I'm going to be planting the corn on May 7th. And I'm going to let it grow, and then probably within 2 weeks, say a few days just prior to the full moon, that's when I'm going to plant the squash in here. And I've also got some squash and pumpkins growing in the greenhouse. They're my backups in case there's a lot of cucumber beetles, because they go after the squash this time of year as soon as they come out. So I like to have backups. I got tons of seeds because I collect my own seeds. Especially because this garden isn't to harvest, let's say, a certain specific type of pumpkin. which means I can just plant with the seeds that I collect that could be a mix of many types of pumpkins, and I have tons of seeds, so I can plant plenty of extra and have extra in the greenhouse. It's really nice when you're collecting your own seeds. And then towards the end of May, I'm going to plant the beans in here, because beans are, of the three, the beans are the most susceptible to frost damage. Squash too, I suppose, but because I have backups, I'm not worried about it. But the beans, I don't want to have to do backups for the beans too. So I'm just gonna, and beans grow super fast. I can, plant them in the end of May or even sometime in June, like right up until the end of the first week of June or so on. They're still going to be able to give me tons of green beans to harvest from the end of July all through August, and then at the end of August I'll stop harvesting those beans, and then let the beans that are on the vine finish ripening up, and then at the end of October and in the beginning of November I'll harvest the dried beans for winter storage. And so the only thing left to say about the Three Sisters is the beans, like I said, they get to grow up the corn. They give the corn, and also the beans feed the corn, because the beans host a bacteria on their roots that take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere and then transform it into a form that can be eaten by the plants. The squash, of course, will protect both the beans and the corn, and the squash, with its big, huge leaves, will shade the ground as well. It will protect the beans and the corn from the animals, and it will shade the ground. Corn provides structure for the beans. The beans ensure that the corn doesn't fall over by keeping the corn well anchored to the TeePee, and also the beans will feed the corn, the squash, and itself with its roots. So that's the Three Sisters, brought to you by the First Nations wisdom that I am so happy to learn about. A ton of wisdom to be shared by the First Nations. Really important to hold on to all that ancient wisdom that's held by the first peoples of so many of all over the world. One last thing, a typical Three Sisters garden doesn't need to be this big. I'm just going big because it's a demo garden and there's going to be a camera crew here, and I just want to make sure everything's easily visible for them. If I had, because normally in a garden this size, I could have this one in the middle, and then I could have one between this one and the fence there, one, and then another one there, two, like basically between each one of these, the big spaces. So I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I could have a total of 9 Three Sisters gardens in this area. But I want to give all the space possible for the pumpkins, so that this corn in the middle and the beans in the middle be really, 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 really protected, because the vines, the squash vines, grow better when they have all the sun they can get. And with the earth being a bit cooler here because of all the water, the squash might take a little longer to grow. I'll be very interested. The first year I planted squash here, it didn't do very well. But obviously this year I needed to do well, but since the first year there's a lot more material here, a lot more thickness in the soil, and so a lot more potential for it to warm up. And I'm going to show you one of my favorite tools for trimming stuff, especially if I want to bring that stuff elsewhere or whatever, if I need to carry it rather than just dropping it on the ground after I trim it. And this is an area that I want to clean up some of the vegetation now, because there's a lot of new vegetation growing. This is a sickle. It's, by the way, I paint all my tools red because I'm often putting them down and forgetting where they are. I'll put them down, I'll get distracted, I'll go elsewhere. Look at the handle on this. The handle's brown, the blade is black. On the ground, this could take hours to find. And like if the lawnmower finds it, forget it. Or if a barefoot finds it, forget it. So I paint it red, it's a lot easier. A lot easier to find. Okay, I want to basically just clean up some of this tall grass here. This is why I like the sickle, because I used to use a pair of scissors, like the big scissors that you have to use with 2 hands like this. So when you cut it, what you're cutting falls to the ground, and then you have to put the scissors down and pick it up if you want to take it with you. Now, if you don't want to take it with you, I suppose the scissors are fine, but I find the scissors also get dull very quickly, whereas the sickle stays sharp for some reason for a very long time. And I'm going to show you why I like the sickle. So you grab what you want to cut, and you basically cut it, and there you're holding on to it. So you know, I don't have to reach down and pick it up. Now these are thick. So there, but some of the thinner stuff, like here's something that's a bit thinner, just really easy to cut. I don't like to pull stuff out. I want to cut them and leave the lower stems. And all this stuff I leave during the winter because the bugs use it. There are probably still bugs inside there, but now I want to clean it up a bit because it's looking a bit messy here. And so you see how I'm just cutting this and holding on to it. Because I want to, you know, put this on the Chinampa or something. I want to use this, and so I'm cutting it and I'm holding on to it. So it's really easy to use. There you go. Very useful tool for cleaning up the garden. So you see now, I've got a lot of it. I can just put it all down here. I've got a little bundle of it because my hand's quite full and I still have a bit more I want to cut. So obviously you have to be careful you don't cut yourself with it. You want to make sure that the hand holding on to the material is far from the blade of the sickle. And I love all this material. You know, sometimes I'll just leave it in place. So that's the sickle. It allows you to have one hand free to collect your stuff while you're cutting it. And I find that really, really useful rather than using both your hands to cut stuff. It allows you also, you know, if you lose your balance for some reason as well, you got one hand free once again. So you can be walking and using it, which is really, really nice. It's just an efficient tool to use. I recommend it. And this shape too. I've seen modern sickles that are rectangular, and I just find that the rectangular ones, you have to pull it towards you all the time. Whereas these you can pull in almost any direction, obviously on the side of the blade, because it's a curve and it works. So you can really work with what you got, and that little end there can reach in and around a whole bunch of stuff that you want to cut.
Take its toll on you and all of your stuff. Just when you think you're getting over, time and circumstance will call your bluff and leave you out there on the edge of the world, feeling the zen, the sound of one hand clapping. Out, and what then?
You use the tension in the middle against the posts you've placed, and then you can actually fit it in and then just flip it up. Now most people will use iron stakes, which would be preferable, and they use one of these big cylinders with one end that's closed to hammer them into place. But I just use per side for these reused wooden stakes. And you know, if they start to, I'll keep an eye on them, and when they start to decompose in the ground, I'll just replace them with other ones while they're still in place. I just hammer them in because this is always going to have that same tension. So I should be able to leave these in place all winter and never have to place them again. So now I'm just going to get some of these pieces of wood out of the way. Now, get this more or less straight. The ends are more or less placed evenly. Now what I want to do is just pull it straight up. So I'm going to go to the other side. Should be easier than from underneath. It'll also give me a better idea. That's how I did it the last time. Now, got a whole bunch of sorghum still there, which is kind of getting in the way, but not too bad. So as you can see, it's staying in place. Now I just have to get it placed between these stakes until I got the flat bottom on the ground. And then I'll just tie them to the stakes with the tie. My stakes aren't perfectly lined, well, I'll just rehammer them or put a couple more in. This is just to get it standing. And voila, here it is. Sorghum on this side that's still in place is in the way a little, but it's no big deal. I prefer to leave that sorghum there because it's really creating a kind of like a raised bed with the root system. And those roots are eventually going to decompose. There it is. It's in place now. I got both of them in place, and they're roughly the same shape and the same height. Really happy about that. So we got 2 columns here. Very nice. I'm going to be putting loofah up in these, and probably a bit of cucumber, and some birdhouse gourd. And in between the two, right here, where it's open, I'll be putting a bit of sorghum. Your posts you put on the outside, and you use the tension of the curve in the metal to hold everything in place. I shouldn't even have to tie these. I probably will at some point. A good heavy mallet. I guess this is a sledgehammer, not a mallet. A good heavy sledgehammer will make it easier to drive these stakes into the ground quite quickly. You don't have to have a pointy end. Just have to have some nice loose soil. As well, they're actually not cattle panels. They are hog panels. They're smaller. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found it useful. If you found it useful, then share it with your friends. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe and support our channel. Maybe watch some of our other videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.